Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to Facts Over Fear. You guys, I know the news cycle is moving about 10,000 miles a minute, but there are some issues that are just flying under the radar that I think are too important for us not to have conversations and then create meaningful action from those conversations. So, more than 3 years now, after Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine sparked a national conversation around rail safety and toxic chemical exposure, many of the same battles are still playing out behind the scenes in Washington. And I think it's so important that we keep what happened in East Palestine at the front of our minds, because so much is still riding on that terrible day. And while public attention has shifted elsewhere, advocates are continuing to fight over the regulations that determine how dangerous chemicals are evaluated, how railroads are held or not held accountable, and whether communities actually have any meaningful say in decisions that impact their health and safety, not just right now, but for literal decades to come. So one of the fiercest advocates out there, and someone that I am just so proud to know, is Jess Conard. She is the founder of RailWatch, and she was recently in Washington, D.C., lobbying lawmakers to protect the Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976. This is literally, I did some digging after Jess had sent me some information around it. This is a foundational, chemical safety law that has been used to evaluate the risks associated with substances like asbestos, formaldehyde, and vinyl chloride. We're going to get into what those things actually mean and what that looks like. She was also there advocating, of course, for stronger rail safety measures and raising concerns about proposed mergers between Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific that critics say could create even more risks for communities already living along freight corridors. And in case you're wondering, a lot of us live along those corridors more than you probably realize. And I know every time I hang out with Jess, I learn so much. My mind is always like blown. And then I'm always saying to her, we got to get you back on the show so you can tell everybody what's been going on. But at the center of all of this is really a much larger question, right? Who bears the cost when corporations are prioritizing efficiency, consolidation, and profit over public health and safety? I mean, literally today we saw Elon Musk cross the line over into becoming a trillionaire, which I don't think any of us can even wrap our brains around. What does that level of consolidation actually mean when that much money is concentrated into so few hands? Jess, big questions. I know got big answers, but thank you as always for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I had such a good time. You guys, her and I hung out a couple of weeks ago and had dinner, and she started sharing with me in real life, which is always fun when we get to be together in real life. And she started to share with me a lot of the things that she's been working on behind the scenes. And Jess, you are just such a force of nature and such a powerhouse when it comes to this incredible work. Before we get into what you've been up to, I just want to ask you, how do you do it? Because there is a real sense of this is an overwhelming topic, right? When we're discussing rail safety as it pertains to environmental justice and racial justice and labor rights and all of these things. When you're looking at how you're going to confront an issue, how do you decide a plan of attack?
This is such a great question. And I've actually been talking about this a lot this week. Being in Washington, D.C., I had 12 congressional meetings. And really, I think my answer to your question, how do we do it, is we have to take pause. We have to take a breath. We have to strategize. And most importantly, you have to have a tribe that is supporting you.
Yeah.
Very early on, there are just so many advocates that reached out or that I was able to connect with. And they are my family. They are my whole heart. A lot of folks from the Gulf South, just from Appalachia, and even, Canada. I have folks in California, Georgia, all over the map. And you really have to invest in those relationships because they're the people that you're going to lean on throughout this. The organizations that have supported me across the board, whether that be an environmental organization or now focused more on the unions, it's just been a really nice collaboration. But in order to do it, you have to have a support system. You have to listen to your body and to your mind, and you have to have giant mugs of coffee.
At all times. No, I think that's so true. I was talking to to another person in the advocacy space, and we were just saying when you're trying to do something bigger than yourself, you have to recognize that you are just one person moving a boulder up a mountain covered in molasses as it's trying to push its way back down. And so pacing ourselves is so important, and having these kinds of conversations so that more people can become aware and share this work and then create meaningful action in their own neighborhoods is really the goal with all of this. So speaking of that, you were recently in Washington, D.C., helping to lobby to protect the Toxic Substances Control Act. So, for people who may not be familiar with it, what can you tell us about this landmark legislation from 1976 that seems to be up for debate with everything else these days? But talk about the importance of this and why you felt the need to be a part of that conversation around its protection.
Absolutely. The bedrock environmental law that is the Toxic Substance Control Act, it's been around for a really long time. About 10 years ago in 2016, there were some really important amendments, and it's those amendments that we were defending. Those amendments turned that bedrock chemical law into something that would support the public interest. And how it does this is it assesses the chemical, the risk of the chemical to the public, and not just in the sense of the health of a white healthy male, but in the sense of vulnerable populations that are other than a white healthy male,
Mhm.
are pregnant, chronically ill, elderly, and it makes that assessment, aside from the corporate profits. It makes it based on health, period. And it was these amendments in how I was able to support the leadership in the national campaign to ban vinyl chloride. This is the act. The 2016 amendments allowed people in my position, community members, leaders, environmental leaders who have been trying to ban vinyl chloride for years. It allowed us to really make that push to put that chemical onto the priority list. Once it's on a high priority list, the Environmental Protection Agency then has an opportunity to review that under those circumstances. The Toxic Substance Control Act assesses both new and existing chemicals. So without these laws in place, we have so many chemicals in our environment that would go unassessed. And without it, we would have nothing to assess those chemicals.
So this is a big deal. This is very important. Why do you think that this has been sort of under the microscope right now? Why is there pushback around keeping this in the ether and making sure that this law stays on the books?
Yes. So there is a draft bill that's going around in Congress that we are very concerned about that wants to dismantle TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act. Dismantling it, a bipartisan bedrock environmental law, is just a really terrible idea. When the amendments first passed, they were robustly supported by both sides of the aisle. And I'm hoping what we'll see is this draft will go away. But it is concerning. There are some fees that are expiring. And what I'd like to see is for those fees to just expire, for the law to be maintained, and we'll be able to maybe add to it or fund it more robustly. Those would be things that I'd like to see, but certainly we cannot go in the opposite direction.
Girl, that just scares the hell out of me that this is like even on the table. And this is why I'm so grateful for you and the work that you do, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about this stuff. And I feel as though mainstream media has really shied away from these conversations because there is so much corporate money now backing these entities. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me as an independent journalist and to talk more about this. You mentioned vinyl chloride. Now, you and I have had conversations about this incredibly nasty stuff, but for people that may not understand vinyl chloride and the implications of what it can do or what it has done, in particular as it related to, what happened with Norfolk Southern and East Palestine, can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes. Vinyl chloride is toxic at every level of its life cycle, from the extraction of the gas that's used to make vinyl chloride, and that's usually from fracking, to the manufacturing of vinyl chloride itself, the transportation. Vinyl chloride is primarily used to make PVC plastic. So these are your number three plastics, primarily making pipes, but they also make things like shower curtains and kids' toys. It off gases. So having these things in your child's tub is really not a good idea. Anywhere there's heat, a lot of the playground equipment is PVC. It's a really toxic chemical, and it is not able to be recycled. It is not able to be broken down. It just sits in a landfill. Or it is burned. And additionally, the way that this relates back to the Toxic Substance Control Act is
Mm-hmm.
there are 16,000 plus chemicals that go into making plastics as a whole. So it's not just vinyl chloride, but there are all these different really toxic chemicals. 11% of those chemicals we know are non hazardous. 89% of those chemicals are either hazardous or we don't know. And so
Wow.
what the plastics industry is trying to do is sell something called chemical recycling or advanced recycling. This is basically just burning plastic. So when you take the 16,000 chemicals and you put them in a pot and you heat them up, it's going to make a toxic soup. They're
Oh
trying
God.
to make a chemical. They're calling it a fuel. Okay, so their energy, plastic to energy, plastic.
Oh God.
And with the dismantling of the Toxic Substance Control Act, now you have all of these new chemicals that are potentially being made because you're melting chemicals and you're putting them potentially on the rail line. So it's all a big scam to make more plastic that we don't need. It's just there's so many related factors, and it's just so important that we take it step by step. We need to keep Tosca. We need to keep fighting back against the advanced recycling industry because it's not recycling. They're just burning plastic. It's thermodynamically inequitable, meaning it takes more energy to burn the plastic than what it is creating. And there are so many toxic byproducts with this. The real solution is to stop making more plastic, to keep Tosca intact as it is. I mean, it's very simple.
If you're just joining me, I'm Natalie Bencavanga, and I'm in hell with Jess Conard. This is our new segment. Are we in hell? I'm like listening to you, and I'm just like, this is insanity. I was like, where is this sentence going next? And what's crazy, you guys, is I've heard her talk about this before, and it's still every time I am floored by the reality that you have to fight for this, Jess, that this isn't the most common, like, this is the most common sense thing, right? And just the level of fight that we have to put up to continue to protect our communities in this incredibly meager way. And it gets me thinking, I don't know if you're ever on Instagram and you see these posts that might come across your feed where it's like, woman discovers how to make, shoe leather out of cactus, leaves or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Why hasn't there been more innovation around plastic substitutes that we can use? Or has there been, but because the plastics industry is so major and so well funded and such a well-oiled machine, pun intended, that these things just don't even stand a chance? Because I see there's innovation all around us, and yet it never seems to make it to market. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so it all starts with fracking, right? Plastic is primarily made with the gas called ethane, and ethane is a waste gas. So
Mm,
we use things to heat our home, right? Like everybody's heard of
mhm,
propane, natural gas, which is methane. Those things go to heat our home, but ethane was a waste gas, and that is primarily what's used to make plastic. So essentially, making plastic is free because it was a waste gas, and so it's
mhm,
cheap. And in order to advance the technologies for things like mushrooms, mycelium, for things like sea grass or whatever, all of those things
mhm.
talking about the cactus. That takes time, energy, and money. And I just don't think that the oil and gas industry is going to invest in that. I mean, they're the ones that are trying to invest in solar. If you look at the solar industry, right, you think
Hmm.
this is so great, but, and it could be,
Yeah.
but we're just not doing it the right way. And it's primarily the oil and gas folks, those businesses that own the solar farms.
Wow.
So you have to ask yourself, are they making it bad on purpose? Why aren't we putting solar panels on roofs or to cover walkways or to cover? I mean, there are so many opportunities. We don't have to use up our land, our
Right.
cropland to put these solar panels. And honestly, I do question it as an industry anyways, because those solar panels are made of plastic.
Stop, Jess. New level of hell just opened, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, no, you're right. This is just like, it's a cycle. It's just a cycle that makes you feel like you're starting to lose it, because I know there are solutions out there. I know there's things that we can be doing. You know there are too, but they take innovation, they take attention. If someone like Elon Musk, who has now crossed into the trillionaire market, which is an insane thing to think about. A swipe of a pen could change the world. And that's what upsets me, is that all of this money and power and influence is being concentrated into fewer and fewer hands. And those hands are basically sociopaths and psychopaths that are making so much money off of, harming the environment, off of creating more problems that they can then find solutions to. It's within their benefit. It behooves them to keep us on this train, pun intended, to the wrong destination, so they can continue to blindly profit. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit here, because speaking of rail safety, we were touching on it a little bit earlier in the show. There were also rail safety measures in, the infrastructure package. When we're talking about, the things that were trying to be accomplished during the Biden administration, that of course everything's been put on brakes. But nearly everyone agreed that rail safety was a priority after what happened in East Palestine. But where do things stand today? Have we made any kind of, is there any momentum to continue to bring rail safety back to the forefront? Because once again, I think these conversations are so important, because people don't understand how much the rail system actually does impact their daily lives, and how many of us live along a close to a rail system that, if God forbid another East Palestine were to happen, could be your neighborhood that it happens in next.
Yeah. Rail safety does impact all of us, and that's whether you live near a rail line, whether you have a family member that lives near a rail line, if you shop or vacation near a rail line, or maybe you have a business, maybe you're a
Yeah.
shipper that uses the rail line. And just generally, our economy does rely on rail. Railroads are very important to our country, and I recognize that even by someone who has been harmed by the rail industry. Natalie, at the beginning of this year, I launched a nonprofit, fiscally sponsored organization
Hmm.
called RailWatch. And the goal of RailWatch is to work with communities to prevent train derailment disasters. And in that, been able to foster a lot of support, not just from community folks, government officials, as well as a lot of the workers. I've been working with the unions, spouses of union members. Everyone's kind of coming out of the woodwork, and it's a one of a kind organization. I'm really excited to lead it. I have some other pretty important folks who have also shown support, which we'll talk about maybe in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the legislation that's on the table, I had worked very early on with Senator Sherrod Brown and then Junior Senator J.D. Vance, who's now our vice president, to work on the 2023 version of the Railway Safety Act. We
Mm-hmm.
have a new version of the Railway Safety Act, and Senator DeLuzio from Pennsylvania. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Four of his provisions of the Railway Safety Act were recently voted into the infrastructure package. This is under
Wow.
the Surface Transportation Board, so it's all very convoluted. Who
Mhm.
actually runs rail? The Surface Transportation Board is responsible for the economic components of rail. Um, And they also do a lot with our highways. This is a funding bill. This is a budget bill.
Hmm.
So by putting these provisions into the infrastructure package, we're able to fund them, which is really important. We're talking about defect detectors, those hot box detectors, which was a huge problem in East Palestine. Um,
Mm.
Two-person crews. There were a couple other ones, but I also want to mention Dinah Titus from Nevada also had her Secure Tracks Act voted into the infrastructure package, which requires human eyes on the
Okay.
tracks to inspect versus the automation. There's some other really integral pieces about blocked crossings and other things that got into that. Now, that package still has to pass. So we're not
Hmm.
done yet, but it
Hmm.
is set to expire on September 30th. So there's still work to do. If you care
Yeah.
about rail safety, you can write to your legislator. You can talk about your concerns. You can talk about their support for the infrastructure package and rail safety. Um, there's a lot of state legislation and commissions.
Hmm.
Pennsylvania Utilities Commission. One of the commissioners, Commissioner Zerfus, actually had proposed some regulatory changes for the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission, which I'm hoping that hearing will be this August. But that would include things like bridge inspections, which I know is huge in
Hmm.
Southwest Pennsylvania. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm working with a lot of grassroots groups and communities there. I know MOTSI has a bill out. So real safety is really sexy right now. I don't know if you get the visual, but it is like sex on a stick, and we should really be paying attention to this.
No, it's so important. Can you explain? You had mentioned hot box at the beginning of that list. For people that may not know, what is that and why is that a concern?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of defect detectors, but it's basically what it sounds like. It identifies when the train wheels are too hot. So, for example, at East Palestine, the train wheel was on fire. So that hot box, that defect detector was not working, was not effective that evening.
Hmm.
You know, I think if it
I see.
had been effective or had been working, maybe they would have stopped the train, but they opted not to.
And we've talked about that at length, and that's like a whole other conversation. As we wrap up, you had mentioned somebody that had mentioned you recently, and I wanted to bring light to this because I think this is very important, just how big the work that you're doing and whose attention it's grabbing. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg recently mentioned RailWatch at an event. What does that recognition mean for you, for this moment, for the movement? And what do you think policymakers still aren't understanding about the concerns communities are raising? Because I watched this part of his speech where he mentioned you, and he said, this was one of the things that I was the most proud of, that Rail Watch is now out there doing this work. But he also said, but there's just so much more that needs to be done. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I had an opportunity to meet Pete, Mayor Pete, at
She's
Amelia.
on a first name basis, everyone.
um, he was wonderful, and I wanted to have some FaceTime with him because I think that um, there were a lot of mistakes made in the East Palestine, and that's put
Hmm.
mildly, but I really appreciate the Time Magazine opinion editorial that he had
Hmm.
that outlined the need to take the crisis in East Palestine and catalyze it. And he was
Yeah.
my initial inspiration to continue this advocacy work. And so it was kind of surreal to meet him in person. And he did express interest in, learning more about RailWatch. And so I've been in communication with his staff. I was able to have lunch with one of his staff members when I was in Washington, D.C. And so it's really nice to see that RailWatch is on his mind. Um, Obviously, major imposter syndrome. I'm just a little girl from East Palestine. But I'm not. I do represent my community, and I feel so supported and just so empowered. And it's really proof that if you have an initiative that you care about, um,
Hmm.
able to access those next steps, taking your concern away from Facebook and into the meetings where the decisions are made at those kitchen tables, being able to talk strategy, find your support system. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see how far we've come, and hopefully RailWatch will continue to grow. There is a website, www.railwatch.net. You can make a donation if you are so willing. But either way, yeah, please keep an eye on the work that we're doing.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's very important that you said, getting off of the Facebook, the social media. It's important that we create this community online. And it's more important that we activate from these communities and go into the real world to make actual change that's going to impact the many and not just the privileged few. As we wrap this up, Jess, looking ahead, when we're looking at the big picture here, what's the biggest rail safety or chemical safety battle people should be maybe paying attention to right now that you don't think is getting enough coverage?
There's so many. I think
That's
that
concerning in and of itself.
um,
She's like, which one? I'm like, oh God.
which one? Yeah, I mean, plastics is always like big bad plastics, right? And
Yeah.
so overwhelming to try to think. There's a great Netflix documentary, Plastic Detox, that came out. It's
Mm,
fantastic. It will open your eyes. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to inspire folks to just find what drives you, what concerns you, what are you the most interested in learning more about, because chemicals are everywhere. Everything in our
yeah.
home is made of plastic anymore. um,
Yeah.
Being able to phase that out slowly and equitably can be challenging, but it's so important. You don't have to go throw away everything in your house that's plastic, but being able to phase in things that are a little bit more sustainable. I'm a regular person. I just have regular money and a regular house and a regular car, and I've been able to slowly phase out
Mhm.
the plastics in my home as well. But there are some things that maybe are a little less opportunistic. But yeah, I think, the biggest thing is remembering that the plastics issue isn't necessarily a consumer issue, it's a corporate issue.
That's right.
But it is our job as consumers to fight back against that corporate industry, to become civically engaged, to make common sense policy that makes the producer responsible for that end game.
Oh, I so appreciate that. Thanks to everybody who joined us today. I'll be reposting this, obviously. So if you came late to the party, don't worry. You'll be able to check it out here on Substack. It'll also be on YouTube. It's also on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. And we'll put up some clips on social media. Jess Conard, thank you so much for all of the work that you do in this advocacy space with RailWatch and beyond. You are definitely one of my heroes. And I'm just so grateful to get to know you a little bit better when we have our little dinner dates. It's just been the best. So thank you.
Right back at
And as always, everyone, until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other and give to Real Watch. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, everybody.